Well, hello, friends. Trisha Goyer. I have a new friend here, Jordan Monson, and we are talking about an amazing woman. We're going to talk about that in a second because he wrote this book about, I hadn't even heard of her before, but we'll get to that. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Jordan, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about the book.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This is really an honor. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I am a professor of missions and Old Testament at Huntington University, just outside of Fort Wayne in Indiana. My history, I come from the world of Bible translation, missionary
Mhm.
Bible translation, and also church planting. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm not sure what else to say. I'm from the Minneapolis, St. Paul area in Minnesota, but we came out here for this professor job, and I've really been enjoying it. And then one of the highlights of my life is being able to tell this story of Catherine Barnwell
Yes.
recently, and just exciting to be able to talk more about her.
I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna share a little story so you can see why this is so meaningful to me. So I'm a homeschool mom. We have 10 kids. We had
Wow.
three biological and we adopted seven. And one of my favorite things to do is to read missionary biographies. The YWAM ones, especially the youth with a mission ones
Mhm.
and just getting in these people's lives. And my oldest daughter, so my second oldest child, my oldest daughter, like, she was 8. She's like, "I wanna be a missionary someday," and it's so cute when they're 8. And then she
Yeah.
graduated from college at 20 with her bachelor's and moved to Czech Republic, and she's been there ever since.
Oh.
But I was just talking to her today, telling her about Catherine because I might didn't heard this story before. And then as we continued to homeschool, read more and more stories, and then out of our adopted girls, that was the thing that really bonded us was reading missionary stories because they go through hard things. And when we
Yeah.
adopted kids from foster care, why did bad things happen to our lives? And so, you know, just like in these missionaries, like God brings good out of sometimes even our tragedies or hard things. And as we continue to homeschool them, that was their favorite thing. And now two of them are in Poland. I just
Okay.
talked to them today. Again, talking to them, I'm like, you have to read this book. I'm gonna have to get you guys these book, get the Kindle version over to them. But what I love is when we share about amazing people like Catherine,
Yeah.
we we get the highlight reel, sort of, but we do share the hardships of our lives, their lives too. But I think it's so inspiring for other people to hear stories like this, to know that one person can make a difference and maybe they can be the one also going somewhere and helping in some way, and whether they're a missionary or working with Bible translation or teaching at a university or being a mom and a homeschool mom. I mean, whatever we do, God can use us. So that's kind of like my heart of
Yeah.
why I'm just been like so excited about this. But tell us why you wrote this story because I know there's a lot of personal connection here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I know I'm supposed to be the one being interviewed here, but if you don't mind, I just got to ask. So you have three of your kids are missionaries now, and you said
Yes,
you have seven foster children that are all adopted.
right. Yes.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of just that's just amazing. What a great ministry to the world, both through the foster care, but also just through sending out missionaries.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's
Czech
and
Republic,
Czech
Poland.
Republic and Poland. 2 of them are in Poland
Wow.
together, which I'm thankful for,
Okay.
and then the one in Czech Republic is only 2.5 hours away from each other. So,
Wow. So they can do
yeah.
little visits and stuff
Yes,
over
yeah,
like
my
yeah,
daughter from the
American
Czech Republic.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, they do, and
Yeah.
then my daughter from, Czech Republic is going to stay in Poland. They're going to a theme park because I guess there's a theme park in Poland. They don't have one in the Czech Republic, so it's super exciting.
That's so funny. That's awesome. Well, hey, those reading missionary biographies all those years is really turning
Mhm.
out to show that fruit. But sorry, yeah, your question for me. Remind me what it
Oh,
was.
why this book? Why this story? And also your personal connection to it.
Yeah, so I worked in Bible translation, and then I think you've just recently heard this story, but I know a lot of your listeners wouldn't, since you're listening to the book. But when I started in Bible translation, in missionary Bible translation, I was like at the very, very bottom of the totem pole. So I remember going to this first Bible translation conference, and my title was Bible translation consultant, and then I had two sets of parentheses afterward. It was like Bible translation consultant in training intern, right? So that was my role. Um, and then something happened while I was at this conference that I've never seen outside of like the movies in real life. So a colleague leaned over to me and she said, "Hey, do you want to meet the Michael Jordan of Bible translation?" And I was like, oh, that's an interesting, image. And so I look to the door where she's sort of gesturing into this big conference hall, and I'm expecting this large, tall man that looks like Michael Jordan, right?
Right.
And then it's this, British woman in her early 70s, the light blue dress on. And my colleague says, like, that's her, right? That's the Michael Jordan Bible translation. And then what was crazy is the whole room sort of hushed, like in a movie. Like, like someone walks into a lunchroom, in a
Mhm.
movie after doing something, whatever, scandalous or good or whatever. And then like the temperature just changes and like everyone sort of hushes. That happened in this room. And it felt like, all the people I had just interviewed with to take this job, the people who I had to impress to sort of hopefully let me through the gates, uh, these senior level people all went up to her one by one to like get their time in with her.
Mm.
And I realized, like, man, there is a story there. Here is this someone who is an absolute star within a siloed world of Bible translation.
Right.
But outside of it, nobody knows. Even people who'd read missionary biographies, like, you've never heard of her, right? Like,
No,
there's no
no.
reason. Um, Now, of course, hopefully there's a reason to have heard of her, but she's just never been part of the sort of evangelical industrial complex. She doesn't do popular conferences. She doesn't do, popular level books or shows or anything. She just leads in Bible translation. She trained the global church how to do it.
Mm.
She's probably one of the most influential missionaries who's ever lived, way more influential than Billy Graham, which you'll get to that when you get to chapter 30.
Oh.
Is it 30? 33? Yeah, she's had basically she completely rewrote the Jesus film and their whole methodology. And since she did that, 400 million people have become Christians after a viewing of the Jesus film. Now, even if some of those are optimistic stats, and even if only half of those people sort of stuck it out, that's still just 100 times more than Billy Graham's
And
influence.
I met Lee Roddy. I've met Lee Roddy, my very first writers
Okay.
conference, and so Lee
Yeah,
Roddy also worked on that. My very first writers conference, I, like, sat in his workshops. I had no idea who he was. It was amazing.
that's very cool. Yeah. And then today there are about 7,000 spoken languages in the world, and 3,000 of them only in the last 40 years have gotten either partial or full Bibles. And almost all of that work has happened according to Catherine Barnwell. I call her Katie. We all call her Katie. It's happened according to her teaching, her trainings, her disciples, her students of students of students. If you were to make a family tree of every person in the
Mm.
world doing missionary Bible translation, that family tree all ends basically at Katie Barnwell. She is the top of the family tree. So she's probably one of the most influential missionaries ever, like on the level of a St. Patrick or a St. Thomas, someone like that, William Carey. But she's not known. So anyway, to answer your question, I just realized I was a writer, and I realized there is a massive story here, right?
Yes.
Like, just I read all these missionary biographies, and here was a story that is greater in meaning or in breadth than the ones I'd read, yet no one's written about it.
Mhm.
Someone needs to write this story, and so that's sort of the beginning of this.
I love that so much, and I love there's a quote in it, and I read it and I posted on Facebook this morning,
Oh, nice.
and you said, "The heavyweights of heaven do not stand in the order we've imagined." And
Yeah.
I just like, that is so
Thank you.
good. And when I was talking to my daughter, so I'm like, we probably video call every other day in the Czech Republic, and I was telling
Yeah.
her about the story. I just barely started reading it. I'm already, like, so excited about it. And she goes, "Mom, it makes sense that, why there's more women in the mission field, the missionaries, 'cause they just go and serve. They just go and serve. They don't need the attention. They're not trying to
Yeah.
rise up the ladder." And I'm like, that just sums it up so well. So I love
Yeah.
that. But that quote, I'm going to say it again because like it's
Yeah.
literally Facebook wall 9 hours ago. The heavyweights of heaven do not stand in the order we've imagined. And I love that
Yeah.
you can see that in the room and that everyone knows that. But like you said, the greater world has no idea of her story. So like, why is she the Michael Jordan?
Yeah, first, I gotta comment on that line. So this story was first a cover of Christianity Today, and then it went to a full book sale after that, and then I was able to write the full
Mhm.
biography. But the CT cover story was probably only 1/10 as long, and because it's only 1/10 as long, the economy of words really matters. Now, I probably had 40,000 words of content, but by the time it went to publication, it had to be 7,000. And it was just like the worst day, the hardest, like all cuts. I have to put up with cuts in the magazine writing world. It's fine. But the hardest cut for me was that line that you just commented on, that the heavyweights of heaven do not always stand in the order we imagine. That line was in the CT story and it got cut, not because it wasn't a good line, but because it didn't fit. Once the stuff around it got cut, it no longer fit.
Mhm. Right.
And I was devastated because I loved it. I was like, this, if there's a one or two quotes from this book that really deserve to
I mean,
stand
I
out,
would put that on
that's
the
one of them.
wall. Like, that's a
Yeah.
like a wall quote.
Yeah. Thank you. That I really appreciate it. You mean like a physical wall
Yeah,
too,
like,
right? Not a
let
Facebook
me,
wall. Yeah.
like, frame that and put it up because it just shows you
That's
what's
awesome.
important. Like, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
shows you what's important in life, and what we think the people we see on TV or on Facebook or doing reels and getting all this attention are the ones that are doing the most, and there's so many people. There's so many people like Katie that are out there that
Right.
we have no idea about.
Right. Yeah, we often conflate influence with celebrity. And it is true that oftentimes they do go together, but there are people like Katie who are more influential than Billy Graham who don't have, though she has the influence, she doesn't have the celebrity because her whole
Mhm,
career has been in a place that doesn't have really a very mediated existence. They don't do a lot of media. And so, in terms of screens or social media or stadiums or publishing events, she's just not been at those, even though she's one of the most influential people, maybe influential Christians who's ever lived. So thank you. I love that you pointed out that line because it has a close sort of place in my heart, a large place in my heart. So I was so glad to be able to get it in the book when it went to a
mhm.
full book deal. Uh, and then I'll see if I can remember. But yeah, why you would you say why is she one of the most
Yeah,
influential?
why is she the Michael Jordan of,
Yeah, so there's a few things. Let's see if I can go through these kind of in order. She is really the most responsible Bible translator in the world for passing the baton to the global church, right? So,
mm,
Bible translation, people still kind of have this idea, especially 20 or 30 years ago. They had this idea that the way Bible translation happens is some white Westerner kind of swings in and Indiana Jones style to an indigenous community, learns their language for them, transcribes it, gives them an alphabet or an orthography, and then writes their New Testament for them for 20 or 25 years. And then they kind of plop it down on a shelf. And then sometimes they're lucky enough that the people care to read it and get literacy training. And sometimes they would just sit there on a shelf and collect dust. Now, that is how Bible translation used to be a long time ago in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. Katie Barnwell is the reason that changed. Though that method may be appropriate in like really monolingual areas, like in the Amazon jungle,
mhm.
where you have these monolingual tribes that don't interface with the Brazilian Portuguese speakers at all. There are some monolingual tribes where that's needed for somebody from the outside, whether Western or not, to go in and sort of do it for them. Maybe hopefully with them, as help, their help. But when she goes to Nigeria, and it was just sort of by accident that the Bible translation movement began in Latin America, where some of this monolingual stuff made sense. But then Katie goes to Nigeria, and she's like, "Listen, these people have college degrees. A lot of them, maybe they're businessmen or accountants or whatever. But there's a lot of educated people here, both men and women. They speak three, four, five languages. Like,
Yeah.
there's no reason I should be taking this Latin American model from the indigenous highlands of Mexico, where the Spaniards never conquered, right? We shouldn't be bringing that model to Africa where they're pentalingual and educated. We should be training them to do it. So that's her first major innovation, is that she was the first, or maybe the most, maybe not the absolute first, but certainly the most impactful early Westerner to move the needle on passing the baton to the global church. She got the global church to translate scripture for themselves with outside help, right? They needed some Bible scholarship. They needed people who knew Greek and Hebrew, but they know their own language better than we ever
Right.
will. So she passed that baton and then she trained the world to do that. So she wrote this book that trains Western or just outside Bible translators in how to train indigenous translators to do their own translation. And basically that was just like her lecture notes for a little class that she ran, but it just sort of exploded and everybody wanted these notes. So she eventually turned it into a book, and then a second edition, third and fourth. And that, for 50 years running, has been the primary training
Mm.
for Bible translators the world over. I didn't meet a single Bible translator in the entire research for this book who wasn't trained on that book. I didn't meet a
Wow.
single one. And that's why I can say that 3,000 languages have had Bible translation work start according to Katie's methods, because it's all according to her teaching, her training, her book. And even if they're not using her book, they're sort of, the world has changed because of her. So even if people aren't using her book, they're still using her methods because she sort of created the path that everyone drives on. She sort of paved the road that everyone drives on now, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, so that was one major innovation. The next one um, is that she invented something called the cluster model, which is she realized it takes years to properly train a group in how to do Bible translation well. It takes years to do that work. But she realized this trick that she could teach two groups at the same time in about the same time it took to teach one. And she could teach
Mm.
6 or 10 or 20 or 25 groups all at the same time in about the same time it took to train one. So she started this cluster model where she would invite 80 translators to come together, and there'd be maybe a half dozen or maybe 3 or 4 translators from different languages. So there are 500 some languages in Nigeria. So this worked where she was. She could pull people together from 20 or 25 languages, a handful or a small handful of speakers of each of these languages. Then she'd train them all in translation principles, and then they'd actually start diving into a book together while they're together. They would do kind of like a 3 week slam session where they'd train and then start wading into the pool, so to speak. So they would start translating one of the books of the Bible, like Luke or something. And then she'd let them go back to their home villages and keep working on it and drafting it. And then they'd come back a few months later to check their work and keep training and keep growing. And basically, instead of taking one Western couple 25 years to do a New
Mhm.
Testament, she was training 25 languages at the same time, and they could finish a New Testament in just a fraction of the time, maybe 8 years. And so you had this exponential growth of how quick Bible translation could happen. Sorry, I just keep monologuing here. There's
No,
all
no,
sorts.
I'm just I'm, like, completely fascinated, just keep talking.
Yeah,
Like, this is
yeah. She just kept,
I'm
yeah.
just, like, jaw dropped, like, listening to all this, yeah.
This is exciting. She everything like I call her the Forrest Gump of the Bible translation world because not in terms of intelligence, but in terms of she just happens to be at the center of everything.
Mhm.
Whether she stumbles into it or whether she invents it herself or just happens to be in the room when it happens, she's always there at the center of every major change in Bible translation for really 60 years. She's 86, still working full time to this day. So she's living outside of London, still working. Um, all right, so she did that. So the passing the baton to the global church, training. Now there's more than 10,000 indigenous Bible translators from all over the world now, and that's largely her sort of baton passing her fruit. This cluster model thing just really exponentialized the speed at which Bible translation can happen because you've got 25 times the sort of increase of speed of training and production. She also revolutionized the Jesus film, which is probably pound for pound one of the most
Mhm.
successful missions in
Mhm.
all of Christian history. Love it or not, it's one of the most successful for sure.
Right.
In that it's the most seen film in human history by far. It's the most translated film in human history, and I would even say more people have come to belief in Christ through the Jesus film than through almost any other medium, save for the written Bible itself in all of Christian history. So when they started in the 70s, they were picking the low hanging fruit, which made sense. They were taking the largest languages, like say Hindi, that already had everything in writing. They're called institutional languages. So hey, let's take a language that's massive, that 100 million people speak or something, or more, and that already had the New Testament, and let's work on getting the Jesus film in
Mhm.
that. So we'll go there. They've already got a New Testament. We'll find local actors. We'll dub it, and then we'll be good to go. And that makes a lot of sense that they started like that. But after about 20 years, they started to run out of those institutional languages. And they realized that their ministry would no longer be able to continue unless they learned how to do translation because they were running out of that low hanging
Right.
fruit. If they wanted to keep going, they needed to find a way to how to originate translation work, but they didn't know how to do translation. Right? It's a very complex, scientific linguistic skill to translate well. Right? People can translate poorly, but when it's scripture, you want to
Right.
translate well. Uh, and so they went to Wycliffe Bible translators, they went to SIL, they went to all of these Bible translation organizations and just begged them, like, hey, we've got this lofty goal of reaching the 30 largest languages out there without a word of scripture that need translation, but we don't know, what we're doing. We can fund it, but we need you guys to partner with us and help us. And what's really funny is it was such a big, lofty, difficult goal that Wycliffe and SIL and all these people turned him down. They're like, we just don't know. Like there was just
Yeah.
sort of, when everything's comfortable and you've already got your income, you just keep doing the same thing. But Wycliffe said, you know who might do it? is this new organization called the Seed Company, which is sort of like at the time, a very young and happening R&D innovator within the Bible translation space. And they, just long story I won't get into, but they had gotten Katie Barnwell to sign on to help them out in the beginning. And so they said, why don't you go Seed Company and this Katie Barnwell? She's really the most respected Bible translator on earth. That was about the year 1999 or so. Um, and so she signs on, rewrites. She basically teaches the Jesus film how to originate translation work. They go into tribes and indigenous groups where the language has never been written down ever in human history.
Mhm.
And she teaches them how to get an orthography that fits, how to actually get an alphabet, right, that works for the people, right? Is it a clicking language, right? Is it a tonal language? How do you get an alphabet for these people that work? Then to write it, and then also to dub it and all this stuff. She trains them in their translation methodology. And what's almost absurd is after her training, their production tripled. And what's really absurd
Wow.
about that is they were doing 3 times as many languages after her training, but they were doing that. Can you hear me still? I'm getting
Yeah,
all
I can, yep,
lost. Yeah,
yes.
okay. But they were doing 3 times as much work, but remember what they were doing before was the low-hanging fruit where the work was already all
Mhm.
done. So before they were basically going in and dubbing it, whereas now they're actually producing, alphabets and writing it all out for the first time
Wow.
and doing it all, and they still managed to triple their speed through her innovations. And since then, 400 million people have at least indicated that they've become Christians after a viewing. Which, even if that's an inflated stat, Billy Graham had 2.2 million, and the Jesus film has had 400 million since then.
400
Um,
million, yeah.
yeah, so we're talking like top 5, top 10 missionaries in all of Christian history just on that stat alone. But then when you look at her Bible translation, about 3,000 languages in the world now have full or partial Bibles according to her methods. And of course, that work is happening. Other people are doing that work. She's not the only influencer
Right.
there, but all of her work is happening on teams, and there's thousands of people around the globe doing this, but it's all happening according to her method. Um, and one last thing, she is not a computer person. She's not written a line of code in her life, but she just happened to be one of those geniuses who was always 20 years ahead. And she saw in the late 80s, early 90s, the need for using software in Bible
Mhm,
translation.
mhm.
And she basically, people can read the book if they want to know more about this. She basically birthed or greatly sort of helped or caused the growth of the beginnings of what became the two software programs that virtually all Bible translation in the world is written on. So if you go to any missionary Bible translator anywhere in the world, I guarantee you they will be using a program called Paratext, and another one probably called Translator's Workplace. And both of them basically had their start because of Katie. And so all those 4 or 5 massive pillars together are at least some of the reasons she's one of the most influential missionaries who's ever lived.
And I just love her story that, I mean, she grew up in a time where women weren't supposed to be educated.
Right.
She became educated. She had a heart for this. And she just started, like you said, things were making sense to her. Like, let's do it this way. And I
Yeah.
was thinking here, as you're talking about all the different languages and clicks and whistles and all the things, I was just thinking of
Yeah.
the Tower of Babel, right? Like
Yeah.
everything is spread out. Like you couldn't have gotten it more complicated because it's just so,
Yeah.
but it was their pride that kind of separated them, and it's humility and service that is bringing God's word to everyone again. And I love,
Yeah.
it's just really connecting with the heart of people, and um that many people now have the Bible in their own language, is
Mhm.
just, it's just amazing. And I just love that, again, if it wasn't for this book, most people, most Christians would not have heard of her, and yet her influence is so great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. No, I appreciate it. Yeah. I'm hoping that in the lists 50 years, 100 years from now, when people say who are the most influential missionaries or even Christians who've ever lived, it would be a success if she can start to creep into those lists for me. Um, I'd love for her to kind of enter the sort of the great pantheon of Western missionary story. In fact, I wanted to title the book "The Last Great Missionary." Now, of course,
Mhm.
she's not the last great missionary, but the idea is that she's the last of the great Western missionaries. That from about the year 1500 until about 1960, you had nearly 500 years of when most mission was happening from the West to the rest
Right.
of the world. Now, of course, that's changed for the better. Now it's really the there's more Christians in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia than there are in the rest of the world. I'm pretty sure, or maybe the global South has more Christians than the global North. We could say it that way. So now mission is happening from everywhere to everywhere, which largely is part of the fruit of her work. Um, but she is really the last, I would say, of these, the great missionary biographies.
Right.
Most of those take place from those years of 1500 to
They do.
1960. And instead of ending around Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, that's around where people start to peter out. I actually say Catherine Barnwell is the last great Western missionary. And the reason is that she basically put the nail in the colonial coffin. And since she kind of buried, she so democratized mission, right? She created such a super highway for the global church to do mission and to sort of get the Bible in their own language, that no one can really come up behind her and have the same kind of influence from the West, because she gave the keys to the car to the
Mhm,
global
mhm.
church. So no one can come up behind her and be like, well, I got a car too. The global church is like, well, we've already got one. So
Yeah.
thank you very much. And so I would actually call her the last of the great Western missionaries.
Yeah, and going back to just, people hearing the gospel in their language and then knowing that people care enough to come to them to translate. I mean, I think those relationships too. Let's just talk a minute about that with Bible translators,
Mhm.
um, and how I think they're able to just their act of serving other people are able to just connect in a way because someone came and cared enough to learn my language. And I think unless you're traveling and doing missions trips or connecting with people, um, people are so excited when you just even say hello in their language. Like when we're Americans
Right.
and speak English and we're gonna actually take time to learn, they're just happy. Like if we can say a sentence in their language, or if we have our favorite words or that sort of thing. But the fact that you are enabling them to translate, working with them, helping them, and then getting God's word in their language, like it's
Yeah.
just so cool.
Right. Yeah. And people kind of forget this sometimes, that the colonial legacy is that people don't matter and their languages don't
Mhm,
matter,
mhm.
right? That like what matters is English or French or Spanish. What doesn't matter is all these, indigenous tribes and their little languages and whatnot. And so when missionary Bible translators would come in and say, no, like God himself sent himself in the form of his son, right? And learned our language, right? He took on our flesh. He humbled himself. He became all things to us, right? So that we might know the gospel and be saved. Therefore, we come to you and we wear your clothing and we speak your language and we adopt your customs as much as you can, without
Right.
entering into sort of questionable territory. Um, but like we incarnate, we become like the people we're trying to reach in order to reach them, just like God became like us, you could say, through Jesus in order to reach us. And so missionary Bible translators are often the first, at least in the European, North American predominant era, that's often the first European ancestry person who ever spoke those languages
Right.
were missionary Bible translators. Because maybe the Catholic Church had been there, or even certain Presbyterian missionaries or whatnot, but they were normally just saying, hey, we're going to do Latin, we're going to use English, we're going to use, important languages. Um, and then, SIL or Wycliffe gets there and says, no, your language is just as grammatically complex. And they were right, just as grammatically complex, just as worthy, just as beautiful of carrying the gospel message as Latin or Greek or English or French. And to be told that is an amazing picture of the Imago Dei, right? That
Mhm.
these people are just as made in the image of God as kings and senators from the
Right.
West. So your language is just as worthy of carrying the truth of God. And to be told that, it's really hard to measure the kind of um, self-respect and esteem that you give to people, right? They can kind of puff their chest out and say, wow, God actually cares about us. I thought we were just this dusty backwater of
Right,
society. And you say,
exactly.
no, like you're not. Yeah. So it's just a beautiful thing.
Like God came for you, and here is his
Right.
words for you in your language instead of like we're better. If you want
Right.
God, you need to come to us. You need to learn this language. And yeah, I mean, we've done just mission trips to the Czech Republic, and like I'm just amazed. Like every sentence, they're like, "Oh my goodness, you took time to learn our language," and I'm like,
Yeah.
I know like 100 words. Like it's so, and
Yeah.
they're so excited. Like people are so excited that you come and care and listen. And I have to tie the story in. So the way God
Yeah.
works. we felt called to go to the Czech Republic. I'd been there researching for some of my books, and
Mhm.
as we're planning for a mission trip to go there to work in a family camp, um, doing English because people want to learn English because
Mhm.
it helps them in school and all the things.
Right.
We got a message on my answer machine. This is back in the day, so we're talking when we still had answer machines on the wall.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Someone saying we have foreign exchange students and we would love to have one with your family. And I'm like, I don't have time to have a foreign exchange student. I am raising money to go to the Czech Republic to do family camp. And this lady, like 3 or 4 times, just kept leaving messages on my phone. And just kept like deleting them. And finally, like the
Mhm.
fifth message, she's like, you know, if you're raising all this money to go, maybe God wants to send someone from the Czech Republic into your home. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, so we had a foreign exchange student from the Czech Republic come to our house, and our daughter, who's now a missionary there, was 15 at the time, and this young lady was also 15 or 16. I think she was 16, and they shared a bedroom. And so at
Mhm.
nighttime, we would just hear them talk, 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 talk. Our bedroom was right above theirs, and they would just every single night they were just talking for a long time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a while later we realized that um, Andrea, was teaching Leslie Czech. She was
Oh,
teaching
wow.
her all the 7 tenses, she was teaching her how to pronounce things, and they were practicing words. And then also, Andrea was asking questions about faith because the Czech Republic has less than 1%, Christians there. And so this conversation back and forth was Leslie learning Czech and then Andy having questions, which I'm like, this basically prepared her to be a missionary because she was learning the language. And so by the end of that 9 months, it was so amazing that as my foreign exchange daughter was teaching my daughter Czech, she's also asking questions about faith and about God. And that was the foundation of Leslie learning the language. And she was able to read by the end of the time my daughter moved back, she was able to read Czech, just pick up a book and read it. She couldn't understand everything, but she understood enough of the tenses and all the things. In fact, she went on to college. She just went into a state university here and minored in linguistics, and
Wow.
now lives there. And after a year was more fluent. Like there's missionaries that lived there 7 years. They're like, we don't even know how that worked. But it was that foreign exchange student daughter teaching these are the tenses. They're laying in bed at night talking. And she's
Yeah.
like just naturally teaching her those things. And again, my daughter's lived there 10 years now, 12 years now. And that just grasping the language integrated her into the heart of people, and they have such respect for her. She teaches at a university there. She started teaching at university when she was 24. Um, Students are
Teach
the
English, or
same.
what does she
Yeah,
teach?
she teaches English. Well, she teaches writing and
Mhm.
speech. They actually have a listening class, but she teaches it in
Okay.
English. So yes,
Mhm.
for people that are going to go teach English in their schools.
Okay.
But it's just so amazing that when the grasp of linguistics, and when you start again understanding and communicating with people in their own language. When I was there visiting in December, her professor that was the head of that department came over and was just like, I cannot believe Leslie just knows our language so well. It was just like that was the thing that means the most for them. And then of course when she has conversations about the gospel, like they can see her heart, and so hopefully they can see God's heart too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and some people are born, just like anything, hard work might make up the difference, but a lot of people are born with a natural capacity for certain things. And if she at age 15 is sitting up, most 15-year-olds would be like, "Oh, yeah, I'll learn a couple language, couple words in your language." And then they kind of clearly with their body language be like done with it. Whereas
Yeah.
if she's sitting up, like begging, their foreign exchange student to learn more, she's clearly got the mind and the gift for learning language well. I bet she's probably got a phenomenal accent too, which normally goes along with the mental capacity to learn.
Right, they don't
Um,
people don't even know that she's American until,
right,
like, at the pharmacy or something when she's she can't pronounce something or has to ask something that's not a very common word. They just
right,
look at her
right.
so confused because most people,
Yeah,
when they meet her, would not have any idea that she's American.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome, and it's a special gift, especially at age 15. If you move somewhere at 8 or 9, pre-puberty, you can learn the language without an accent, but around age 15, it's almost unheard of, but some people are able to do that, and as you were telling me the story, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I know people like this," and they're rare, but they're special, and they have a
Yeah.
calling, I think, a lot of them, to mission work, so I'm glad
Oh,
she's
yeah.
doing that.
And never gonna live here again. Like, she's married a Czech, they have Czech kids, she's all yeah, so which I love. I just love that God is using her in that way. It's so
Yeah,
special. Okay, I could literally talk all day about this because I think it's so cool. But the
yeah,
amazing thing is there's a book that
you
I'm
got it.
going to finish listening. Probably by this weekend, I will have this finished because it's just so
Mm,
fascinating. But tell more, just quickly as we're wrapping up, about the book, the title,
mhm.
subtitle. I don't even think we mentioned the subtitle yet. And then um, one special thing about it, and then where can people get it?
Yeah. Okay. So Catherine Barnwell, How One Woman Revolutionized Modern Missions. I've been calling her Katie Barnwell, but Catherine Barnwell is her full name. Interestingly, her family calls her Rin as the end of Catherine. Her
Oh,
brother,
yeah.
couldn't pronounce Catherine when he was a toddler, so he'd call her Rin, and it sort of stuck. So all of the letters I'm reading through for all of my archival research, everyone calls her Rin in her family, which is interesting. But yeah, you can pick up this book anywhere where books are sold. Of course, it's on Amazon, it's on Audible. It's me recording it. Let's see, it's on the Kindle. I asked them to bring the price down. I don't quite understand the intricacies of it, but the Kindle price is almost as much as the hardcover,
I don't
which I
know
think is
why
a little
they're doing
strange.
that now, like, it's been a conversation going around. I have multiple books published every year, and I'm like, "What is up with this Kindle price?" So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and apparently there's algorithms involved, and Amazon has more say than I thought they did. I don't really get it, but I was like, if the hardcover is $20, that's fair, but the Kindle should be like 13 then, but the
And
Kindle
I'm
is still
trying to
like
see.
18.
I didn't even pay attention to how much I pay on Audible because that's
Yeah,
where I mostly listen. I just buy credits and I just click.
yeah,
It
mhm,
was like a 10-second decision, like, go ahead and get the
right.
Audible version, which
Yeah,
you did a great job.
thank
That
you.
was a special thing I was hoping you were gonna mention about the book, is that you actually narrated the book.
Yeah, I kind of fought for a bit. I got the chance to audition. Normally for a biography, they won't let an author do that unless it's like a autobiography. But I said, "Hey, can I audition?" And they gave me a shot, and they said, "Yeah, you've got what it takes." So I do give that little memo in the beginning, though, about how Katie had, colleagues from all over the world, and I won't be trying to do their accents since
Yeah,
I'm
I
not a
did notice
professional
that.
voice actor. Yeah, and I asked, I was like, "Can I put this in here? Because I'm not going to be attempting the accents." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, you can put that in there." But yeah, it was fun to have the chance to do that. They sent me to a local studio, and it was, had the sound engineer through the dark glass and everything. It was fun. Yeah, so that's a bit about the book. I got to spend a week with her in the UK. They flew me to London. And so before I'd been doing all my interviewing via Zoom, but then I got to spend basically seven
Mm,
full days with her, 7 12-hour days with her. One funny thing about Katie is she's still working full time in Bible translation.
wow.
And the only time that she could make for me is when nothing was happening in Bible translation. Like, she's just so committed. But the only time in the year when Bible translation really like shuts down is about December, say 18th through about January 2nd, right? And so that was the time when she was open. So I, as a professor, also have that time open. And so I
Mhm.
went right after Christmas and then ended up spending New Year's Eve and New Year's with her. And we just spent every day interviewing. I'd look through her files and folders and correspondence. I unearthed some interesting stuff that she had forgotten about, in her files. And it was great to spend that time together. And then let's see, what else did you ask? There was one other part of that
Oh, I was gonna
question.
say, I said, "So is there anything special about the book?" But the narration was what I was hoping you were gonna mention, and you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That was special. And just spending the time with her, feeling like I know her, I got to, not only was I with her in her house, but I helped make meals for her. She's 86, so hard to get
Yes.
around. She's got a walker. So I would, help clean up and help do her dishes and things. And just to meet a living legend, someone who,
Mhm.
were she Catholic, could be a saint, someone like that, and then to be able to do their dishes for them is kind of special.
And I love that she's so busy with working. Like, you think if someone's gonna have a book written about them, that would be the priority. Nope, you can fit in when I'm not doing my important work.
Right. Yeah, everyone keeps saying like, "Oh, what does Katie think about the book?" Assuming that like she's pining by the door waiting for her copy. I was like, "Are you kidding? She hasn't read it yet. She's busy finishing 3 Mbembe Old Testaments from her original project." This is a beautiful end to her story. And sorry, I'm robbing a little bit of what you would read toward the end of the book. Um, but the very first project she went into before she went into more and more, higher and higher leadership and kind of revolutionized the way everything was done, her very first project, she was sort of famous. Everyone loved her. And now the grandkids of that early sort of church, early translators that she trained back in the 60s, the grandkids of them are saying, "Hey, now we need the Old Testament, right? We got the new, but that's like
Mm.
a machete without a handle. It's like a tree without roots. We need
Mhm.
the Old Testament now." And we hear that this famous Katie Barnwell that our grandparents used to talk about is still alive. And we want her, the famous, Katie Barnwell, to help us with our
Oh,
Old
I'm
Testaments.
crying now.
Oh
That's
yeah.
so good.
So she had like risen to the top, tippy top of the ladder, but then when she hit her mid 70s, she realized she started to slip, right? In that she didn't want to like have a stroke or like die in the
Mhm.
saddle, so to speak. She didn't want to leave. She ends up doing basically 20% of the workload of the fifth largest missions organization on earth, all came through her. 20%. And she
Wow.
realized if she were to die in a saddle, that would be a disaster for the organization.
Mhm.
So she started to kind of unburden herself of thing after thing and to kind of step back down the ladder so she could train, the next generation. And then this project found her, where the Mbembe said, "Hey, we want you to come back and help us with the Old Testament now." So she
Wow.
stepped into there's three related dialects, and she's helping do three different Old Testament translations. One of the things you'll hear her say regularly is, "I need to keep improving my Hebrew." And of course, everyone laughs because she's like this renowned academic, PhD linguist who's changed the entire world. And all she sees is what's ahead. I need to
Mhm.
improve my Hebrew. And everyone else just laughs like, "What? Like you're Katie Barnwell. Like, get over it." But now she's kind of climbed back down the ladder and is working on the Old Testament in her original project.
I love that. Oh my goodness. So good. I cannot wait to finish this book. Definitely go and check it out. We will have all the links to the show notes. But Jordan, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the time that you gave. I know your heart is in it. It's so clear that you're passionate about this, but thank you for that. And where can people go to connect with you online?
Oh yeah, I'm not super involved online, but I have a Substack. You can go to my website, Jordan Monson. So it's Jordan spelt the regular way, and then Monson's Monson. JordanMonson.com. You just Google me, you'll find me. I have a Substack that I put out like one thing a month. I won't be spamming anyone. I'm on Twitter or X, and also not very involved there. But I'm around. I try to take
He's
after
around.
Yeah, I try to take after Katie a little bit in that. I try to be influential, but not be too much,
Hmm.
too much of a presence in people's faces all the time. So yeah, that's where I am. And on my Substack, I'll let people know when new writing is coming out, whether I'm writing for Christianity Today or if another book comes out, which I've got a couple in the pipeline now. So yeah,
Awesome. So great. Thank you for being here today.
yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.